Hi YouTube, it's Taiwan Carr, and I am back with my review for Underground Season 2, Episode 9. This one was called Citizen. Um, First things first, I see that we do see that James knows how to keep his mouth shut when he needs to. I saw on the run, he didn't say a peep when those people came in after Cora. But anyway, we start off with Kato, and he is in the safe house that Georgia has, and he's snooping around, obviously, just going through every nook and cranny of the house, trying to see where all the hideaways are, where the secret doors are, and everything. And he just is in there looking hella suspicious. And we then see that he runs into Minty, or Harriet Tubman. And she's looking at him and asking him basically, I think that she asked him maybe what his name was. And he asked her a couple of questions, which she answered, among which was what was her name. And she said that her name was Minty. She didn't say that her name was Harriet. She didn't say that her name was Moses. She didn't say that her name was General Tubman, anything that would have identified her as who, the person that he's looking for. Because just right away, she doesn't trust him. And she just kind of gives him the, stank face look. And, tells him her name is Minty, and, he kind of just moves on. And the next thing that we see, and before I get too far into it, a lot of this episode was done in flashback sequence, and I hate when they do that because so often I get things kind of confused. So if I get anything wrong or out of sequence, or if I leave anything out, then please put it in the comments, especially if it was something that was important that we need to know before the next episode. And so we see now Kato going to talk to Patty. And he's basically telling Patty Cannon that I'm pretty sure that I have the house where Harriet Tubman is. She fit the description. She, didn't say that was her name, but she fits the description of the person that we're looking for. And he, told Patty that she was sweeping up in there. And Patty's like, okay, so you really think that the most notorious slave stealer is sweeping? She's like, are you retarded? What's wrong with you? And so, of course, we know that she should have listened to Kato to get what she's looking for, but thankfully, she was too stupid or arrogant or whatever, however you want to call it, to listen to what Kato had to say. And then at the end of their conversation, we see Kato slit his wrist. And from what I understand, from things that I've been told, and I don't know, I've never tried to commit suicide, and I don't take it lightly, anybody who has tried to. I understand that slitting your wrist horizontally doesn't really do the job, and that they kind of say that people who want attention, that's what they do. But Kato slit his wrist vertically and very deep. And so I don't know if he was really trying to kill himself at that time, or if he was trying to show Patty how loyal he was to what he needs to do, because if he's injured, he won't be moved from the station house, so he'll have to go back. If you understand what his motivation was for slitting his wrist like that, please put it in the comments. And Elizabeth is taking care of him now after he slits his wrist. And they both get to this conversation, which I won't go deeply into now because they're going to go back over this conversation a little bit later in the episode. But they basically are both talking about how fear is kind of the only emotion that you have left to run on. And, Elizabeth lets him know that her husband was shot and killed, and, that this fear is just consuming her. And Kato tells her to what did he say? To pull it in, that fear, to what to do with it is to pull it in and then push it out, and just kind of lash out at the people who made you feel that way. And Elizabeth, we know that Georgia has talked her down from some things since her husband was killed, and I think that Elizabeth, that was kind of just the advice that she's been looking for, and so she decided to listen to Kato. So Elizabeth takes that advice that Cato gave her, and she decides to go and torch this barn. And again, we're in flashback mode, and I think that we see next what happened that led her to that. She's working the front desk at the station house, and this man comes in asking for a room. And she's looking at his hand, and I think that she's, recalling who he was. But I guess maybe she wasn't sure. She asked for a name, and he says John Hawkes, which is her husband's name. And immediately, I guess she knows who he is. She slaps him in the face. And she went and told Georgia what happened, and she's ready to retaliate. And Georgia's like, okay, well, look, Elizabeth is telling Georgia, look, this man walked right into your house. And it's like she's trying to get Georgia as riled up as she is. And Georgia's like, yeah, okay, he walked in, but he walked right back out, it's okay. And she's like, I understand, that you're maybe still feeling, I don't know if it's hurt or afraid after what happened to you, because this is the guy who took Elizabeth into the woods and tortured her, basically, had her tied up against a tree and was threatening to brand her face. And Georgia's telling her, and I don't know if, I think that the point that Georgia was trying to make to her is that, you're white. And if it had been me in those woods, I wouldn't have made it out. She's like, you made it out, so kind of like, be thankful. And Elizabeth took that as a bit of an insult. But Georgia tells her, there's a reason that I try to pass for white. It's not just because it's all fun and games. And so basically, bottom line their conversation, Georgia is telling Elizabeth that she needs to chill. Okay, then the next thing that we see is Elizabeth rushing in to find Cato injured. And that's where she starts to take care of him. And in taking care of him, they have this conversation. And I don't know if Cato is in any form or fashion being sincere with her, or he's just playing on her emotions to try to get more information out of her. But that's when she, starts to tell him about John's murder and how she's just now overcome with this sense of fear. And then she gets, again, that advice that she wanted, that she's been waiting for someone to give her. He tells her to pull that fear in and then push it out against, everybody and just become this monster, basically. And so she takes that advice. I guess of all the people who've been talking to her, she decides, to listen to Cato. And she goes and she finds the man who... she finds, I guess it was his barn. I don't know if it was his barn or his house, but she goes and torches it, sets it on fire. And she ends up hurting his son. And Cato is he follows her out and he sees what's going on. And I think that he's the one who pulled her out because she was kind of consumed by the heat of the fire as well. And so she, we see everything go up in flames, and then we see her wake up on the back of this wagon, I guess, with the man's son, and she takes him to the safe house so that he can be treated, so that he can be cared for. And she lets Georgia know exactly what happened, and Georgia's really disappointed in her, and she's telling her, Elizabeth's point is that he was being raised by his father to be just like his father. He thinks that owning slaves is his right. And so, basically this kid is collateral damage, and I did what I had to do. If he gets taken out, then it's okay because he was going to grow up to be just like his father. And Georgia's like, well, you don't necessarily know that. And so, this isn't right. And, you caused him this pain. And Georgia tells her that that John Brown rhetoric, and if that's how you're thinking, then you're a dangerous person, and I can't have you here anymore. So Georgia is having a conversation with Harriet, and she lets her know about the conversation that she and Elizabeth had. She lets her know that a man who attacked Elizabeth came into the safe house, and Elizabeth slapped him. And Harriet's like, "Well, good for her." And Georgia's saying, "Well, look, I understand, you saying that to me, but please don't tell her that because this girl does not need any more encouragement towards violence. She's already thinking the wrong way." And so Harriet, just kind of warns Georgia about Cato, the new cargo there. She just says, he doesn't look trustworthy to me, so basically be careful. And one other thing that I didn't mention, when Cato was snooping around, we saw him, I think, peek in on Georgia while she was putting on her white face makeup. And so I don't know if he just saw it as a man, just as a woman putting on makeup, or if he also realized in the snooping that he did. I don't know if he found her papers and realizes that she's passing. So just another thing to mention. So now we have Harriet on the road. And one thing, okay, did she have a blackout while she was on the road? That's what it looked like to me. So if I have that wrong, let me know. If I have it right, you can let me know. But it looked like she was, on her wagon, and then her head was just down, so I was assuming that she'd had another spell. And then the next thing, it looks like we kind of just see her go off into this little hideaway spot, and then this man come by who probably would have caught her. So I'm guessing that that was one of her spells that she had, where God let her know what was going to happen and what she needed to do next. And for this woman, back to just real life, for this woman to have been moving around the way that she did, whether she was with people or just by herself, and to know that she would just black out like that from time to time and never got caught, I know that God had to be with her. And so it doesn't surprise me, that she would be a praying woman. And we see her in Ohio at this place, like a little general store or something, where they put up something. And to me, I thought that it was a slave bill that she tore down, maybe for someone who was on the run. But if I don't know what that was, or if you caught what that was and it wasn't a slave bill, would you also put that in the comments? But she goes and stops into a church and prays. And among the things that she's praying for, she asks for God to help her with the sin of pride. And she's not understanding why she's been chosen to tell her story. She talks about Frederick Douglass and William Still wanting her to go and tell everyone her story and to keep speaking. And she doesn't really think that it's her place. And she is struggling with seeing herself as in this leadership role that everyone's put her in. They want her to be a teacher. They want her to be a leader. And John Brown has even named her General Tubman, but she is not seeing herself in that light. She thinks that every runaway story is just as important as hers, but she doesn't understand why she's been chosen, I guess, to lead. So she prays for God to just help her with that. And then the next thing that we see is her get to a safe house where she meets up with, well, at least Noah opens the door, so we know that Noah and Rosalie are there. Okay, so now we're back in flashback mode because we know that Harriet and Noah did not meet up in Georgia, but now we're in a safe house in Georgia where Rosalie, Noah, Cora, and James, they left Macon to get here to wait. And the lady who runs this safe house is not feeling safe about them being there. And she's like, hey, this is not the deal that we had. I was told that I was going to be housing 4 people that nobody was looking for. You guys went and torched your master's big house, and that's all that anybody is talking about. So, no, y'all got to get out of here. And Noah's like, looks around and is basically like, okay, well, we see that you need the money. And if we go, the money goes with us. And so this was just one of those situations where money talked. So she's like, okay, just stay away from the windows and lay low. And don't say anything. Just shut the hell up. So anyway, she did keep them because she needed the money. Now, also, while they were at this safe house in Georgia, Cora mentioned that she didn't feel safe. And she was basically, I think she just kind of didn't feel safe because it was a white woman there. And this is probably Cora's first exposure to being around white people outside of her slave master. So it would have been a really normal feeling for her to have that kind of apprehension. But she stayed there, and then we see them go on to the next station in South Carolina, and we see James and Rosalie and Noah kind of sleeping in this little like attic loft type space that had a ladder leading up to it. And then we hear some, I don't know if we heard gunshots, but we heard some yelling and some kind of commotion, and they all wake up, and Rosalie grabs her gun. She's like, "Where's Cora?" And we look down, and we see that Cora's trying to run into whatever kind of little shed that they were staying in, and she gets shot in the back, and she's just face down. There's no way that anybody can help her because clearly these men are right on her tail. And then we just see her body get dragged out. I guess maybe someone grabbed her by the feet or the ankles, and we hear them say, we hear one of the guys say, "Well, I told you to shoot her in the leg," and then we hear another guy say, "Well, we're still going to get a reward, dead or alive, so it doesn't matter." And Cora just, looks up into the space where they are, but she doesn't give them up as far as we know, and I'm guessing that she won't survive this injury, and so maybe she won't have the chance to give them up, but Cora turned out to be more loyal than Rosalie thought she was going to be. So the next stop for, now we're minus Cora, but the next stop for now Noah, Rosalie, and James is North Carolina, and they're lying in the bottom of this wagon covered up, just kind of laying down. There's no room for them to move, and James is asking a lot of questions, as kids do, but he's asking questions about, life on the run, and, is this how we're going to have to travel everywhere we go? Because, James has been living in the lap of luxury, and he's not understanding this, traveling in the bottom of wagons and shit. He's like, look, I just was living in the big house with my own nice room and nice clothes and my own ponies. Like, what the hell is, this is not how me and Miss Susanna travel. And so, but they let him know that, no, this isn't how we're going to have to do. After this, then we're going to be on a train. And, it's explaining to him that, it's going to be faster than any horse you've ever ridden on. And, you're going to just get to look out of the window and see the whole world go by. And, so he's kind of excited about that, and he's asking questions about what it's going to be like to be free. And Rosalie, lets him know that, you're going to get to go to school, you're going to get to read. And he was like, well, Miss Susanna was already teaching me how to read. And so really, James did think that he was free. And so they're kind of having to reprogram James now. And he's not really putting up any resistance, but his line of questioning and kind of the answers and responses that he's giving, and the more questions that he's asking, it kind of makes me think that had Rosalie not torched down the big house, and if James thought that he had that big house to run back to, he probably would have gave them up and, would have told somebody, hey, I belong to, I'm the property of the Macon plantation, return me, and, this is my crazy sister, she burned the place, if she hadn't burned the place down, like I said. But I think that if he had the choice to go back, he probably would, because it is hard being on the run, and he's just a kid. Okay, so now we are in Virginia, and kind of back to where that flashback left off, where Noah answered the door. And Noah and Harriet are having a discussion about God. Noah tells Harriet that Rosalie told me about these, spells that you have, and that when you have these spells that God talks to you. And he also tells her that I don't believe in God. And I think that would have been a very common thing back in those days for enslaved black people to not believe in God, because if you look at it, this is, the religion that their masters have given them. And I'm sure that it would be hard to, reconcile oneself to reason of, how me and all of my people here on this plantation are suffering, and we're serving the same God that my master is serving, but we don't get any breaks, like not even, freedom, like nothing is good for us. How can, I bet, that had to be something that a lot of enslaved black people, an idea that they struggle with. But Harriet talked to him, and asked him a little bit about his background, and told him that she knew about the Macon Seven and their plan to run, and she knew about a lot of their exploits, if you will. And she basically, through her line of questioning, talked him into the fact that he did believe in God. Basically, he had to have believed in God to even have the courage to get on the run, because he didn't have any skills at reading maps. He didn't know people, where to go. And Noah's like, well, but, 7 of us who left, and he said it's only 3 of us who made it. And I don't know if he was not including himself in that number, because it was 4, because it's Noah, Rosalie, Cato, and Boo. So I don't know if he's leaving Boo out of it. But anyway, I thought that it was odd that he said 3. But anyway, she basically talked him into the fact that, yeah, you do believe in God, and you had to make a big move like that. And I liked how she did it. She wasn't preachy like a lot of Christians can come across when you talk to them, or I should say us, and they can just want to shove the Bible and scriptures down your throat. She wasn't condescending to him, and I think that maybe he did walk away from that conversation believing that maybe he does believe in God. So now Rosalie and Noah finally have a moment to themselves, and they basically have it out because Noah is angry as hell. Basically, he didn't know that Rosalie was pregnant all this time, so he's really upset that she, I think kind of the way that he said it was, put their family in danger to go and try to save her family. And he says, you didn't even tell me, you didn't give me a choice in the matter. So he feels like he was tricked into going, which he kind of was. And Rosalie's telling him, it's not like that. And I see both sides of it, because of course she would want to go back and get her family. But she should have given him all the facts, So he feels like, he was tricked into going. And not only that, but that she treated him like a slave, like he was her slave. And he tells her, that you're just like your father. And we know, based on what we know of Rosalie, what we know that they've been through, that had to have really hurt her to her core. And so this scene made me so happy to finally see Daniel in the heart of an episode and not in just the first 2 minutes of the episode. So I'm like, yes, are we finally going to get him tied into everybody else? And so what's going on with Daniel is they're at, it was the Fellows Plantation in Kentucky, right? And there is basically, I don't know if it's necessarily an auction, but his master is selling off the slaves. And I think that just this talk, the rumors, the fear, and I don't know if the rumors have been confirmed that John Brown is coming, has all of those slave owners in that area really scared, and they're selling off their slaves. Families are getting ripped apart, and his daughter is describing to him what's going on. And you hear the crying, you hear the whips, and just the shock and terror that must be going on. You probably can feel the sadness and the grief in the air if you're there. But she's telling him, she's just describing what's happening. This woman is getting pushed, and this boy is getting separated from his parents, and all these things. And so it's just filled with all the shock and terror that you would expect when something like that happens. And then Daniel talks to his wife and tells her basically that he's kind of come up with a way that they can stay together, but really the only option that they have is freedom for them to stay together. And so his wife kind of suggests that, women always, we want you to play it safe. We need that safety and security. And so she's suggesting that he just go and talk to Massa and, tell him to please, let our family stay together. And Daniel is not having it. He's like, I'm not going to be shuffling off to Massa. Oh, I'll be a good Negro if you let me. He's like, no, that's not how we're going to do it this time. And what I'm going to do is go and find this John Brown. Freedom is the only chance that we have at staying together, so I'm going to do what it takes. So Daniel tells his wife, just be on my side, be with me, and love me, and we'll do this. We'll get it done. And she follows his lead, and this is what, oh man, I fell even more in love with Daniel in this scene. I'm like, just that strong leadership, he's like, we're doing it. Even though this man is blind, or maybe he's only partially blind, I can't tell, because it kind of looks like he can see a little bit of something. I don't know. I hope that he has some vision left. But anyway, just to see him take that leadership role, and no, I'm not going to go begging anybody out. I'm going to do what we have to do, and to not be afraid walking around blind, or at least partially blind, and talking to people and asking these questions, because the next thing that we see is him get loaded on the I guess like work wagon so that he can go to the university to do his work. And then once he gets there, he walks up to some men and asks them to point him in the direction of Ripley. And so that's why I'm thinking that he can see, because he was asking people to, point him in this direction, and he would go. So I'm wondering if he can just make out maybe basic shapes or something. But anyway, he got to where he was looking for, and he did get stopped and asked for his to show his freedom papers, which he didn't have, but he had work papers, and his work papers showed that he should have been at the university. And the man who stopped him did question him about that, and he let him know, well, I was allowed to go and get my bag worked on because like my handle broke. And I think that he broke the handle himself. Does anyone know that? Because he was kind of fidgeting with it when he was getting on the wagon to go off to the university. So he asked to be pointed in the direction, I guess, of the nearest cobbler. And he gets to a man who's really friendly, and he fixes his bag and doesn't charge him anything. And while Daniel's there, he's talking to him about how he's been reading about cobbler shops, basically, and how they're usually only maybe one or two in a town, but that there's 6 here, and that he knows 2 of them to be shops that are friendly to the cause, I guess, to the abolitionist cause. And he's hoping, that he has happened upon one of those shops. And the man who's working there, the cobbler, I guess, he says that he doesn't want to get into anything political or anything, and he doesn't know what Daniel's talking about. He's not being rude, but just saying, I can't help. Looks like he's more so scared. He doesn't want to get caught up in any drama or have anyone come looking for him. And Daniel kind of just says one last time, I really was hoping that that's what I found, and I guess not. But then we see the man kind of be like, well, hold on, let me, tell you something. And the next thing that we see, which is the final scene of the episode, is Daniel showing up at George's safe house. Elizabeth is there to greet him. And, so he's made it there. So I don't know if something's going to happen in the season finale where Daniel's going to get back to his family, or if this is going to be a part of season 3 now, where it's going to show them on the road back to Kentucky to go and get his family. But I'm so thankful that he made it there, and I'm just so proud of him. This man is blind and putting everything on the line for the freedom of himself and his family. So I'm hoping that everything works out.